Hello, I'm Jessie, the sleepy koala, because I'm Australian and I'm tired. Today, I would like to continue my recap of the Cytoverse with the second book, Starsight. Starsight is 6 months after Skyward. The DDF have been able to secure some of the platforms in the atmosphere, which gives them quite the advantage. They have moved most of the pilots and a large chunk of the DDF to Platform Prime, which is one of the big platforms that they secured. One thing that happens right at the beginning of the book is Admiral Cobb and his aides find some footage from the computers in Platform Prime. They play it, and what they see is a Delver, which is this giant space monster that appear near Detritus and kill everyone on it, because there used to be humans on it way back when that weren't the current humans. And everyone is pretty terrified by this, because that is very scary, because it just goes over the planet and then they are all gone. So everyone is scared, but also curious as to what this is. The other thing that happens, there is someone who Spencer can hear her calling out in what Spencer calls the nowhere, which is this blank void of space that is full of angry eyes that she knows very little about. But she hears this voice calling to her. Suddenly, there is now a ship that has jumped in to the space outside of Detritus's giant shell and is trying to make it through and being shot by all the platforms, but makes it through and is starting to crash. And Spencer and some of the other Skyward members jump back into their ships and go after it, and they're able to stop the ship crashing and stop the person dying. What they find is an alien in the ship named Alanic, who is from the planet Redawn. Alanic says that she was going to infiltrate the Superiority, who are the big organization behind the Krell, and she was going to try and find out how they are able to hyperjump their ships, because it's this giant mystery that no one in the galaxy knows except the Superiority, and it gives them the advantage for trade, for movement, and Alanic and her people want to know what it is. She is not doing well after this crash at all. She gives Spencer a translator pin, so Spencer decides to go in her place. She's able to put a skin over her that makes her look like Alanic, and they can also change Mbot's appearance to make it look like Alanic's ship. So Spencer jumps away to this station called Starsight. Alanic is expected by the Superiority, so when she gets there, she is introduced to a bunch of characters, taken to a house where she's meant to be living, and meets Kuna, who is a mysterious character who you don't quite know the intentions of. She meets Braid, another human who also has the same type of powers as her, and you meet Winzik, the big bad, who is the most annoying person in the world. Spencer then goes to the tryouts for the Superiority Air Force, does really well, but is very horrified because they use live fire in this tryout, so a bunch of people died. In this tryout, Spencer meets two of the people who will eventually become her flightmates, Hesho, who is a Kitsen and is very reminiscent of Japanese foxes, and Moriyuma, who is a very interesting alien who is considered too aggressive by his family and by the Superiority, who really don't like aggression. They're really in the peaceful way of living and pretending that the way they are aggressive isn't aggressive. But other people are aggressive, and then we can be aggressive to you. That's some logic there. After the tryouts, Spencer meets the rest of her new flight crew, because we gotta have flight school again, and it consists of Moriyuma, Hesho, Braid, Vapor, who is a gaseous smell who can talk and move through space and does not need to breathe or anything like that. The flight is sent to another location via a ship that hyperjumps, and everyone's very curious about how it hyperjumps. But they go to this other location, and what they find is this giant metal shell that shoots things at them and gives them nightmares when they enter it. What it is a Delver, but it's only the inside shell. It doesn't have the rest of the spooky around it. The shell is known as the Delver Maze because it is very confusing and they have trouble finding the center of it. The goal for the flights is to get better at flying, but also to try and find the center of the Delver Maze, because what they want to do is try and find the center in an actual Delver, not in a Delver shell. So he spends his flight, train a bunch because they're not great at working as a flight, and then at some point they start going through the Delver maze. The Delver maze is horrifying. It shows you different things for every tunnel that you enter, so you always have to have two people because they will see different things. And if they see the same thing, then it's what the tunnel actually looks like. Eventually, Spencer and Braid make it to the center of the Delver maze, and they are able to get out because for some reason it has atmosphere. Now that they have found it, Braid sets off a device, and Spencer realizes, horrified, that the plan of the Superiority is to make the Delvers jump to different points that they want to, and then let the Delvers attack, which is, again, pretty horrifying. But the other thing about the center is there is this little hole that you can climb into, and that is the actual center. And of course this one, there's nothing in it. It's just like a little hole. So that's not very helpful. Spencer and Braid leave the Delver shell and go back to the ship that will hyperjump them back to Starsight. Spencer has set up a plan to be able to see what the Superiority do to hyperjump ship. She uses a little drone that has a little bit of M-Bot in it, who, after some really cool finagling, ends up in the engineering bay so that it can watch what's happening. When they jump back to Starsight, things don't go well. It becomes apparent that there is someone trying to find this out. Spencer is still able to get the drone back and put it in her backpack, and she's trying to get off the ship and get back to Starsight while not having this drone found. And there are now checkpoints where people are checking all the bags. Spencer ends up escaping with Kuna, who has been on Spencer's side the entire time, despite Spencer being very skeptical, and also Vapor, who is a spy for Kuna. Spencer finds out when she plays the footage, but before herself, Kuna and Vapor, that the way that the Superiority do the hyperjumps is using the Tannic slugs, like the one that Spencer's been carrying around for 2 books, called Doomslug. Spencer also reveals to Kuna that she is human. They accept Spencer and the realization that Spencer is human. Just after these revelations, Vapor, who apparently left at some point, turns up and says that everyone's being mobilized and Spencer needs to get back to her ship. Spencer goes back to the ship out in space outside of Starsight and foolishly reveals herself to Braid that she is a human. And this doesn't go well. Braid grew up in the Superiority and was told frequently that humans are bad. So yeah, Spencer, that was a dumb decision. Spencer has to escape in a ship because everyone now wants to get her. Hyperjumps away to Detritus, which is something she's struggled with for a very long time, but she's able to hyperjump this time. But she leaves M-Bot behind. While Spencer is talking to Cobb and being at Platform Prime, the ship that had all the other Superiority pilots hyperjumps to Detritus. And suddenly, there are a lot of ships in space outside the Detritus planet. So Spencer leaves because she is trying to figure out how to stop the Delver and knows that Braid is going to be the one to try and pull it into the physical realm. All of the Defiant pilots also go into the battle to try and stop everyone who's shooting at them. Eventually, Braid does pull the Delver into the physical realm. However, before that happens, Spencer sent a message to Cobb saying everyone needs to turn off all communication because the Delvers are attracted to communication. So all of the DDF goes silent and Spencer is trying to push the Delver to go to Starsight, which is very noisy. So it does. And now there's a Delver outside of Starsight. Spencer and a number of her Starsight flight crew jump back to Starsight to then try and defeat the Delver and save Starsight. We get this really nice reveal where we find out that Moriyama can get through a lot of the hallucinations and psychological problems because he is 2 people in one from how his alien species work. And by doing that, he can see in the way that 2 different people would see and be able to compare. So he saves Spencer. Spencer gets into the Delver. She gets into the middle and she goes into the little hole and she ends up in this white room and there's like a completely white person at the other end. Spencer walks up to it and saves the day by friendship. It is the friends we made along the way. She she shows this Delver that all of these noises are actually people, and the Delver then gets horrified and the Delver leaves. Marima saves Spencer from dying in space, and she ends up in the Starsight hospital. Kuna comes to get her one day, and they are attacked by Winzik's thugs and escape. Kuna hides in a closet with Spencer's hologram bracelet so that they are not recognized as Kuna, and Spencer runs outside and encounters Braid. This does not go well because Braid is trying to set Spencer up and make her the villain. Spencer ends up in a place where she knows there's a portal to the nowhere, and when she is there, she finds Mbot. Mbot has been dismantled. He has been completely stripped and destroyed. But he's also just a drone in the corner. Don't worry, guys, Mbot's not dead. This isn't something I'm super salty about at all. But anyway, Mbot's having trouble thinking because he doesn't have the same processors as he did in his giant ship. The end of the book is Spencer, Mbot, Doomslug entering the nowhere portal. Close curtains. To be continued. So, Cytonic will presumably pick up from this. It hasn't been released yet, but we will see how it goes and how this cliffhanger is handled by Brandon in the next book. Also, at the end of Starsight, we have Jorgen, who has told Cobb that he also has the defect. He is going through the cave system because he can hear singing, and he's following it. And he eventually finds caves full of tannic slugs. So this is very helpful to try and give the DDF an advantage against the superiority. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hoped that was a good recap of Starsight. I will see you next time for a recap of Redawn, which will be the next book released. It's the first novella, and it follows alongside Cytonic. Brandon has said you can read it before or after. Very much up to you. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.